Hi, welcome to the Colors for Craft podcast, the podcast that aims to educate, inform, and engage our audiences about the meanings of color, textile and craft coloration practices, and the future of color through research, education, and experiences stemming from the Colors for Craft project based at the University of Helsinki. I am your host, Dr. Dustin Neighbors. In this episode, I am joined by Anna Nuuntinen and Laura Seppälä from the Colors for Craft consortium to talk about future studies and the Color for Craft project. Join us as we discuss the purpose and significance of future studies, what the research process consists of, and how future studies is incorporated into the Colors for Craft project. Please allow me to introduce our guest. Professor Anna Nuuntinen is Professor of Fashion and Clothing at the University of Lapland in the Faculty of Art and Design. Her research interests combine future studies, design, and craft. She applies these research paths to develop education and research in the field of fashion and clothing. Anna's artistic activities incorporate experiential futures research, where her designer's know-how and hands-on experience guide a futures-oriented thinking, the latest applications of which are shoes made from waste materials. Dr. Laura Seppälä is a postdoctoral researcher for the Colors for Craft project at the University of Lapland. Laura's research has concentrated on sustainability and future studies, along with dye practice interviews with design educators and students. Anna, Laura, welcome. I just want to start off with a quick question. First and foremost, what is future studies?
Okay, so the future studies is a systematic study of possible, probable, and preferable futures. And what that means is that there are lots of possibilities. There is not only one future, and also it's unpreferable and preferable futures. And it explores trends and uncertainties and potential scenarios to help individuals and also companies or even governments to prepare for what lies ahead. And unlike the traditional predictions, future studies focus on multiple possibilities rather than single fixed outcome. And there are some key aspects of future studies and this exploring these alternative futures, but also that it has an interdisciplinary approach. And it combines the insights from science, technology, economics, politics, sociology, and more. And then there is also this scenario planning that it creates narratives from different future possibilities. And I assume we are going to talk about more trend analysis later, but that's one of the parts of the future studies. And what is the idea is to prepare for the future and also make work for the desirable future.
I think that's really interesting because when I first heard about future studies, one of the things that stood out to me is how do you predict the future? There's so much uncertainty. We never know what's going to happen tomorrow. But the way you've just described it is it's very analytical. It's very much a process that you take in all considerations because you said economical, it's political. Is it difficult because you can have so many different outcomes? You can have so many different things you're looking at. Can it be overwhelming?
Yes, it can be overwhelming, and there are certain methodologies to map out the futures. And it's not, if I understand it correctly, it's not so much about predicting it, but mapping out the different possibilities. And obviously there are lots of factors, and when people are doing the scenario work, they make the different scenarios of the possibilities.
This is really interesting. So I guess my next question would be, how did either of you, Anna or Lara, get into future studies? How did you become a part of it?
I think, Anna, you can start since you are more familiar with the future studies or you have longer history.
I have three perspectives or 3 points that I can say how future came to me or how I developed my profession towards the future studies. The first time I just realized that there is something like future. It happened somewhere when I was a child and I started to know the time. I knew how to read the watch. It was really wonderful to realize that TikTok in the living room or ding dong in the kitchen, they were not only some things or sounds, but they were really giving the rhythm to the everyday life. And also it is wonderful to think about, since I'm a designer, the hands of the watches and clocks, they are not only moving decorative parts, but they are really telling stories about the time of the day, night or day, everything. That is one thing. The other thing at that time I realized, and it links to the colors, is that I somehow, my world somehow turned from black and white photograph to a color photograph. And also my place in the world was not anymore bystander, but participant of the world. So that's quite a great moment. I'd have some sort of feelings and memories about it, but I don't recall the exact moment, but I realize that it is something to do with the clocks and watches. And the second question with the future studies became more real when I started to study in the University of Industrial Arts about fashion design, because the future and the time and timing is, or predicting certain things are part of the designer's work. So that was some part of the design work, but we didn't study futures research especially, we just studied trends. But anyway, that is one great moment to know more about the future and understand my own position with it. But in the postgraduate years, the field of futures actually expanded into the multidisciplinary field in my life and in my thinking, because I got an opportunity to study and teach future studies at the Turku School of Economics. So this little moment as a futures teacher gave more insight to the field. And the third thing, I realized that it happened in September 1999. I was participating in one conference of future studies. And there was a Romanian expert who strongly argued that designers are not needed in the sites of disasters or avalanches or earthquakes, among other disastrous things. And that was a really surprising argument. I didn't really know what to say about it or what to think about it at that moment, but I have the strong idea that futures and designers are not separate things, or disasters and futures and designers are a good combination, they are needed. And that was a reminder for me that my part in the future studies is to make the future together with the others.
I think that's an exciting point. I also agree with you. Like, so odd to hear someone say that design has no place in disasters, when I'm sitting here thinking the people who actually are protecting us from disasters like wildfire, they have to wear protective gear, So that's very much about thinking, designing in the future, thinking about what kinds of material can sustain that much heat, thinking about how do we protect, especially if it's in natural disasters that involve snow, avalanches, making sure that people have warm clothing. It's very short-sighted, I think, if someone is not thinking, oh, there's no place for that in the future. And the other thing that came into my head when you were talking about the clock, hearing clocks gives me anxiety. So I think there's a difference in all of us, the way we think about, or when I hear a clock, or if I hear the cuckoo clock, it's like a startling reminder, oh, it's the future. It's like I've been so stuck in doing what I'm in the present or in the past. But it's like, oh, I don't want the future to come, because that means I've got something else coming up. It's interesting to see you think of it as an excitement, whereas some people it might be an anxiety to hear and have these stories. And I think maybe that's what future studies does as well, is that it gives us ways to think about our stories, our narratives, and who we are.
Yes, and I was going to say as well that I'm also trained as a life coach, and there's this like a personal future, that how people can change their personal future and how they can see it in different areas of life and so on. So that's the one point. But my history with the future studies is very normal. I found a course of future studies in my master degree, and I studied basic courses like APRO, we say. So basically I have had the basic courses, and then I had chance in this project to dive in. So that was my history about it.
So are you more into looking at, because I also know you have a background in team co-creation and all of that. Is your approach to, I guess, future study is how can we improve certain processes, both the organizational, but also ourselves? Because I like the idea of you saying that there's a personal futures as well. And it's because it just triggered in me thinking about, I have ADHD. So one of the things that I have to struggle with is planning out everything, making sure, but also thinking about what I need to do in the future, how I can be better in the future. So thinking about potential possibilities that come up. I never even thought about this. This is a whole new, you're already blowing my mind this morning of like I'm having personal truths come to me at this point.
Yes, and it's exactly like that it can be seen as a collaborative work, that how you do the teamwork for the future and also in a personal level. And both also go hand in hand because teams are consisting from individuals. So basically they interconnect.
I think we're all interconnected in some way. Anna.
Human beings have been realized to have different futures attitudes. There are some people who are always late. They have the past tense always going on. Then there are people who are always like exactly in time. And then there are people who are always somewhere like dreaming about the future. Quite often, I think that nowadays we respect those people who are thinking about the future, so that there is always kind of space to act if needed. And the people who have the past tense, they are kind of distracting everything. So even though there might be good things in that, so that they know how things should be done, because they know the history. But that's something kind of past tense, and it doesn't fit into the future lifestyle or present lifestyle. But those people might be also annoying who are always exactly in time, because that's kind of too much to both of those who have the past tense and who have the future tense. And the best combination would be like we in here. If you, Dustin, says that you may have difficulties with the future, I am the person who would like to be exactly at time. And then Laura, maybe you have first thing, maybe you think about some last like past things, and together we make a good team who can give the best into the future's plans or future's planning.
That's a really unique way of putting it. I didn't think of it like that. Think individuals themselves of, how we approach our own lives. We bring a certain perspective to it that we can balance each other out. And if we're thinking about potential scenarios and things, we bring something to the table.
I learned something new about this, that this is like a personality trait, but my point is that you can change it. I'm one of those people who have changed it. I used to be chronically late everywhere, like 5 minutes, few minutes, not ever in time. And then I kind of realized that if I just change my inner clock, and I will have 5 to 10 minutes, so I will be time every time. And it's actually making my life less stressful, because then I have time. Well, obviously the opposite side is that I need to wait. People are often late, so I try to be exact.
Again, all of these truths are hitting at me and just bringing things to mind. I'm always early. I'm always 10 to 20 minutes early because I get anxiety if I'm late. I also know plan for any contingencies or plans that happen. So I'm thinking, oh, the metro will be late. Oh, the bus will be late. So I plan for that. I build in an extra 5 minutes. In doing that, I've already got this 20-minute head start. I build in another 5, and for every contingency, I build in another 5 minutes. Then I'm actually sometimes there 30 minutes early because I plan way too much. But that anxiety of being late, so to speak. So interesting that I actually do plan for the future. I anticipate for the future.
We discuss about being late when we discuss about future. And that's maybe one thing also, that we have to have metaphors or comparisons to be able to discuss about future, because future is something that is not existing yet. And that makes it also difficult to study. We have to find ways, there should be some remarks, some things in the past that we can discuss about the future. There should be some things, like you say that you are afraid of being late. So that's one thing that we have in the first beginning of all the first things in the present moment to look at future. And then we have to think about the future in that sense, like we discuss about personal things, that what are we doing with our value world, for example, to be able to discuss or look at future. So we have to find out some things that we can discuss about something that doesn't exist, but we expect to anyway to become existing sometime.
You make a point there that actually leads me to a question that's kind of not on the list, but the question of, is there too much? Is there a limit to how, or being paranoid or thinking too much about the future that we overanalyze? Is there any such scenario where that a potentiality of overthinking it? We're thinking about the worst possibilities or all of these things. Is there any limitation within this?
I think that if you discuss about social media, the discussions going on in there, some people get really afraid. They are nervous. Maybe kind of general tone in our society today comes from that we have too much information, we have too much abilities and wisdom to overanalyze everything. So we don't have anything to really grab on, and that makes us nervous. And I think that that's kind of problem in that sense. And futures research tries to find some kind of things that we can grab on, some technology, some methods, some systems that the whole mess of information is somehow in such a form that we can even at least look at some things in that. And in our case, for example, our way to really write the project plan is one way for us to look at the future in such a narrow complex that we can handle it. At least we think that we have possibilities to really solve something or discuss something with that within that frame.
It's interesting that you mentioned technology, because I actually had written down here I wanted to bring up at some point, because I think for me it's something that's been on the forefront when we're teaching and we're dealing with students and technology, thinking about AI and thinking about AI in future studies. Is that a concern, that we rely too much on technology, or, as you said, that there's nothing really for us to grab onto? Does beg the question, how much should we rely on technology when we think about future studies?
Well, I think it's like help, but you need to be really in charge of methodologies and data collection and all of those things. It can help a hugely amount, and it has a place. It cannot lead the research.
That's a good point. Thinking about it, it can't lead the research. It can't be our sole focus. We have to consider other factors in there. So we're already talking about future studies and we're thinking about technology. What does the research process involve?
The starting points, identifying the research problem. So what you are actually researching, this is obviously common for all research. And then you set up the question that in our case, that how natural dyes affected the dyeing culture in 2050 or whatever it is, the research question. And then you review the existing literature and like existing signs that there are these like megatrends and weak signals that are like key terms of future studies. And megatrends means that something like becomes so huge that it's all over. And the weak signal means that it's like showing a little bit there and there and there, and then it might grow up as a megatrend, not necessarily. So basically looking at the literature and what is existing and looking at the world, and then it's formulating the research questions and scenarios and the hypotheses and what are the possible, probable and preferable futures. And then you choose the research methodology, and we will talk about later this future cone that we have chosen. And then there is collecting and analyzing the data. So basically it follows the traditional research process, and it looks like evidence that is existing. So it's not any way like forecasting of the future.
You make the point about looking at the literature. So it raises the question, if we're thinking about future, how much of the literature involves things like the news articles, newsprint, or even popular publications like journals? Is that part of the literature, assessing what potential futures are existing now or where we're going to? Is that part of that literature survey that you do?
Yes, it's like a part of the mapping of what is happening in the world. So basically, if you are looking, for example, weak signals, the journals and common popular journals and news articles and so on can be good ways to collect the information. And then there are like lots of different methods. We picked this one that we are going to discuss, but then it's obviously how you use the methods, how you analyze this data is like a crucial that you make the right decision.
Anna. This qualitative quite much, but of course you can quantify also many things about future. And for example, this literature search is one thing that we can quantify. For example, amount of articles, amount of topics, amount of places around the globe that we would like to find out certain point. But what I would like to add in here, what Laura has said, we have these 3 Ps, which means possible, probably, and preferable futures. And Laura mentioned also the weak signals. But we also need to be somehow aware of so-called wildcards, that they are the events that have low probability, that we basically know that there are such things, some surprises which are called wildcards in future studies terminology, but we don't really know when they may hit or when they may be somewhere or exist somewhere, how much like impact they will have. Those are also things that we should be aware. And for example, this mapping futures, or environmental scanning, which is the kind of regular thing that we do as futures researchers, that make us somehow sensitive about things that may happen. But wildcards are something that they are really surprises. And one thing in our futures studies is the openness for the surprises, that, for example, we have really good paths as work packages, how to look from the history to the future, to the year of 2050. But still, there are certain things that we don't have any idea, we didn't have any idea, and we still cannot guess, but they still might surprise us. Like we earlier discussed about these personal views to the future, that's important in the research group. But one thing is also about the group thinking, that how far away we think or look as fashion designers, how far away we look futures researchers or chemists. We may have really different futures horizon, the end line. And we in the futures cone process, we mark future till 2050, which is so much away from us that we cannot really guess from our everyday experiences that what might happen during those years between today and 2050. But it is close enough that we can imagine, and it is in our lifetime. So of course we have the ideas that what we wish for that period or what we don't want to get. So there are certain frames that we have, or certain kind of holes in our frames that we should be aware of, and they are the wild card.
I'm interested in this wild card because as you're talking about it, these things that we can never anticipate or anything like that, the first thing that comes to mind is COVID. None of us expected that. And it also leads me to ask the question about, do we think of wild card as people's decisions? Because we don't know what people's decisions are or what role people will play. If we think about COVID, we didn't know that was going to hit, but also the extent to which COVID made an impact is people's actual decisions. So what happened to the US, we had over 1 million deaths that were associated with that. It ended up because of someone's decision to not do anything. So is the wild card also people's decision making?
Wildcard is kind of, how can I say, kind of bomb to the societal routines. When wildcard hits, it always opens up some things that are taboo or something that we take as self-clear things. And for example, when I think about our project, the making things by ourselves, thinking about colors coming from the nature is something that came up really strongly after the COVID. The wildcard forced us to think. And that's one important thing in that. Wildcard is not something that we should be afraid. We have to try to find the benefits of it.
I just read about this. There were some countries, I don't know to name them, but who were preparing for pandemic. Like they have a strategic planning and a future sight about coming pandemics, and they, according to the research, did better because they had a plan existing. So basically the COVID itself, how it appeared, wasn't very much seen, but there were still possibilities of a pandemic and how to behave, and some countries had prepared for that.
That's kind of their own future studies that they did. They didn't know or would identify it as that, but they are preparing for potentialities of the future. Anna.
Yeah, pandemic has been in a list of megatrends of 2020. It saw a list in the beginning of 2000, and pandemics were among those, and there has been like these changes in the climate, but also these aliens coming from space. They have been in the list for a long time, and the pandemic has been something that people have been able to grab on it because that's most the realistic things or real things in that list.
I think that raises a very interesting point, which we'll bring up when we talk about the futures cones in a minute, because I think one of the things you just said was about aliens and that it depends on who you are. Is that really preposterous? Or we'll get to that in a minute. I think the other question is when you're thinking about the research process, and particularly as we look at Colors for Craft, how does stretching fit into future studies? Because stretching is one of the elements of the project, how we can stretch what certain innovations happen within the project. How does that fit into future studies?
The stretching is basically, we have used it in quite many places in the project plan, but we were thinking a good name for out-of-the-box thinking, and stretching is one, and it also opens one letter in the craft, in the name of the project. So it is outside of the box thinking, and our aim is to just uncover things that are under our everyday routines and the 100-year-old use of synthetic dyes, and trying to find out things that were really strongly existing in societies before synthetic dyes. So that is basically the one word that reflects all that.
Okay, so we're thinking about, in terms of stretching, what we've done in the past, but also what potential can come in the future with related to the dyes. So we're thinking about Colors for Craft, we're talking about stretching. Why was future studies incorporated in the project? What role did it play?
Well, firstly, like 2050 has built in there, we are looking at the natural dyes, and it's like a very essential that what happens with them in the future, because it wouldn't be a very clever or reasonable to research only the past times and let that be there. There needs to be future applications. So need for the future applications and like a future of the dyes is essential that they will continue formulating further and becoming more popular.
Is there an element of the fact that we're trying to think of ways and trends that will sustain into the future, but there's also an element in the future thinking of how do we make sure that the actual innovations that we do sustain in the future, and also with the protection of certain kinds of technology, application, knowledge itself is protected for the future. Is that an element of this?
Exactly.
Anna, you wanted to say something.
You asked about this focus on future in our project. It is originally in the call that came from the European Union. They asked, the title is Traditional Crafts for the Future, a New Approach Call. And the future is in there, the crafts is in there. And we started to discuss with the University of Helsinki about the opportunity to combine our thinking, and then after that the whole consortium was collected, the possible partners were found, and everything came from the title that we got from the Horizon Call. And they expected, of course, to get the multidisciplinary people or the study group. And when we got that, we could really find out the way, how do we get the future into this project? So basically, we have been fulfilling all the information that Paul gave to us. And it was written quite well into the original information. So we just modified it for our needs.
I think it's really interesting because the general call, when it says, thinking from a historical background, you think about a call that says, how do you make something for the future, or thinking about the future? I wouldn't think of future studies. I would think of how can the past inform the future? That's the way I think. But it's interesting how you interpret the future in terms of, we can apply for future studies to see what potentialities can happen in the future. I would never have thought that, but it's interesting the different perspectives and how we approach it and how you interpreted that call.
It also led us to think about the futures cone. It came quite early, since futures cone has also or contains also that view that we have a past and we extend certain things exactly from the past to future. But then we have these arguing opportunities or options in there too, so that we may start from future without any past, and then we could get like backwards. How could we get this link from past or from present to that future idea? What would be the steps that we need, even though they think they might look to be really far away from each other, maybe really difficult to reach. But since we are now in the middle of our project and can see that the kind of originally weird things are quite much realistic already, and we see that we can reach them, even though not at the end of the project, but we have next steps ready for the next part. So future is not so difficult, but of course it is the thing that it is not often thought to be research field. It is more like horoscopes or some other things that you just would like to, for example, weather forecast. You need to know something in near future and you would like to get help from them. But this makes more effort and more energy and more time.
And after listening and working with you for the past year, I've learned so much. I've never thought more about the future than I ever have before. Since you brought it up, let's go ahead and talk about that. What is the future's cone?
Well, it's cone. It's a structure that has form of cone that has tip in the left, that it can be in the now or in the past. And then it opens up to the right and it has like 5 orbits, which are like projected future, which is the kind of default future business as usual. If nothing changes, this will more certainly happen. Then there is a probable future that is likely to happen, that it's very likely that if something crazy doesn't happen, it will happen. And plausible is could happen, so there is a possibility. And possible is might happen. And then a preposterous future, which is ridiculous and almost possible future. And these are the orbits of the future's cone. And then all of these potential futures that, depending on the circumstances, can happen.
And for our listeners who want to see this actual image of this cone, there's going to be a fantastic blog post that accompanies this. We'll make sure that you have access to that. But it's interesting when you say that they're different, and I totally understand that it goes from, the immediate futures or the probable and the possible. But I love how there's an element of the ridiculous. Why is the ridiculous included?
Well, the preposterous is included because it's also a possibility, like that something that would happen.
Anna.
Ridiculous is something that also important in connection with weak signals. We have in Finland, we have futures researcher Elina Hiltunen, who has been studying and also made her PhD work in the weak signals. And one thing that she says, that it's some really weird thing makes a person to laugh. Then there is something that you have to really look at it, because that's important signature. And the more you can think about ridiculous things, mean that there are things that you really can say, you can really articulate. So it means that it is not so ridiculous anymore, but it is like today's preferences or today's fashions. For example, we may think about that something is really ridiculous and stupid, and those people should take some lessons about how fashion should be done today. So it means that there are paths from that ridicule to something real. So it is, Laura said, it is very important to have the ridicule things in the opportunity for the ridicule things in the future's cone, because they are the opportunities far away. They are just waiting for verbalization. They are waiting for some prototyping or something that they can be real. And of course, the reality can be the thing that the ridiculous thing is something that we don't want to have anymore. But anyway, we have to recognize that there are such things then as ridiculous things.
I will say that when we were, and I hope I can share this without giving away too much of our research, but in one of the workshops, it was really interesting because when we were thinking about fashion in the future, one of the things I said that was ridiculous was the idea that in the future, clothing may be made of technological screens where people can change the color of their outfits. And we have to think about technology. And for me, that's so far-fetched because A, it's very expensive to be able to wear something and to be able to create something that is either translucent or that is technological that you can also wear, where you can change the color, you can change the design of it. But the more that I see and think about technology, where it's headed with AI and things like that, it doesn't seem so ridiculous. Yes, I know.
Probably if you see social media or anyway YouTube videos from fashion shows nowadays, you can see this clothing that wearable, and there are these screens and the opportunities to change the colors. And that has been searched a long time, for example, in that sense that if you were in the hospital and cannot take care of yourself, for example, little babies, when they get wet, so the color of the clothing changes somehow, either because of the technology or some other reasons, some other things, but they have been under search for a long time. And I'm sorry to say to you that the technology of clothing is not a new thing, but what I have seen quite often, which is something that is not so much accepted in society, in social life, is the kind of non-clothing, which is painted on top of your body. And there have been people, maybe in Helsinki also, during this year, that somebody was walking along the corridors of shopping center with only paint over her body, and police came and took care of her. But anyway, that's kind of topic that is too much. And basically, there might be the thing that is not so much about the technology and innovation that the thing, but the social acceptance.
I'm a historian, Anna, so I'm always going to think weird things way after everybody has already thought of it. Because me, wearing technology, I'm a historian. We're looking at old textiles. We're looking at old clothing that would never come up in the mind. So when I talk about it, it's like, oh, that's new and innovative. And then I love how some of my colleagues, especially in that work group, that's already happening.
I must say that was new technology in that time. What you think as history now?
Yes, exactly. That's history now. And it's funny how, based on our different perspectives and where we are, we see things from a different lens in terms of what has developed, what is developing. I'm old school and you're at the forefront because you've already seen it. And I like this idea of considering how the ridiculous can inform the future. If we're thinking about the future study, then we're thinking about the future's cone. How does color fit into the future's research of the project? I know there's color forecasting, future color trends, future color stretching. How do we do that? And then also, what does that do for the project? How does that help us?
Well, I a little bit go to another direction, but I try to answer. One of our hypotheses is that color or like a dyes will change to the natural dyes. This could be one potentiality. And we have done this annual cycle that when you get the colors from the plants and mushrooms and so on, then our hypothesis is that like a color trends will change to this annual cycle, and there won't be like a similar trends that they are today. So that's one future scenario. But obviously, it's more likely that the color trends will continue still. It's like a more possible scenario.
There will be definitely some changes in the color forecasting also, because now we have based forecasting on the synthetic dyes, and synthetic dyes, since they are done in the laboratories, so we can manipulate them quite a bit, and we can control them, so that the current forecasting system is really different compared to the natural dyes. And since natural dyes, there are lots of things influencing to the growing of the plant, so that there is this climate, the place, the soil, the water, everything. So there are lots of variables in the dye sources. So it means that there will definitely be some differences compared to the forecasting systems today. But anyway, there are these, if you think about the forecasting in general, there are always get groups who would like what color or what kind of hues, what are the tastes and preferences. So those things definitely will stay. But there will be some things that also the current understanding about the natural dyes is that the the amount of hues is quite limited compared to the synthetic dyes. So the more we understand about the natural dyes, the more we develop the processes, so we can get the really large or rich amount of dyes and hues. So we go on and develop the forecasting system. And this circular thinking is one experiment to change the system, because the synthetic dyes cause us to follow the linear path, and the circular path is something that has to be tested more. But we have very good start in the University of Lapland.
It's really interesting when we think about trending. So we're thinking about potential trends, certain inspiration, motivation, things like that. One of the things that I'm curious about, and I don't know that I've asked this before in the project itself, one of the key elements that we look at in the project is traditional craft practices, the creation of these dyes, the creation of textiles. How much do we look at when we're looking at forecast trending, when we're looking into futures, does the past play in that decision? Because I'm thinking, if we're looking at future studies and we're looking at the future trends, how do we make sure that traditional craft practices continue, or that has a place to evolve, or has a place in the future?
Yeah, I was going to say that I suppose it's a matter of will, that like those are taken account and considered, and like people want to remain them, and this cultural sustainability that old dyes, for example, really want to be stored, and there are like places in the world and these and places where they have done dyeing for centuries, and they are now becoming popular again, and the cultural heritage is becoming popular again. So my answer would be that it's a will of the people to want to remain it.
I do think that. I understand that, and I kind of agree with it, because I think cultural heritage is something that we protect, even though the future is going to evolve and it's going to go in different directions, and it's going to probably, that's one of the things we're talking about, that it will still be around. It will be preserved and protected in some way. And I think that part of this future trend is also, how do we continue to preserve it and form the future about it?
The other thing is that past teaches us or educates us. We would like to learn a lot of information about the dyes or plants and manipulating them to the dye stuff. But then we are also discussing about the scaling of the natural dyeing to the industrial level. And that is something that is new. It doesn't mean that it is spoiling something or somehow denying or negating something from the past. But past is something that gives us new ways of thinking. That's also the stretching, that we try to find safe ways to go to the future with the past.
I like that you said, just because we're doing something in the future is not negating the past. And I think there's often this idea that the past is bad and the future is good. I think there's a mentality of that sometimes, that we have to improve, that we have to evolve. But in that evolution, I don't think we have to dismiss, negate, get rid of the past. In fact, one of the things I argue in all of my research, we are where we are today, and we will continue to progress to the future because we have the past. We have the knowledge of the past. We have the craft. We have all of that. We wouldn't be where we are today, and we wouldn't be moving to the future without that practice, without that lived experience of the past. So I think one of the things I hope from this project, and I'm learning from you all, is there is a balance between preserving the past, appreciating the past, and moving into the future. I like that you said that. Thank you, Anna.
And that's a little bit like, it can sound like a self-evident, but it's true that we three are here now because of our past. Like everything that has happened has brought us to this moment. And this can be think about also in a larger scale, that the state of the world is accumulating from the past. So basically it cannot exist without the past.
Are we now going into the existential question? Like, where do we come from? Where are we going? Because to be quite honest, I think we've bonded a lot in this group, and I talk about that. One of the things that I think about is I'm a little old country boy from Georgia. I never would have thought this was my future. So how did I get to where I am to meet the people like you? That's an existential question, but that also thinking about how the future's roles, like who we're going to meet, who we're going to interact to, who we're going to learn from. But again, it's too existential for in the morning.
And it brings us also to the stories that stars tell to us, that you have something written into your horoscope early enough, but you were not seeing it. So maybe some things have changed if you had seen the story that has given to you already.
I believe that. And there's also, like, I see a lot of old movies where people say, I've seen the future. Do you want to see it? And some people are like, yes, I want to see it. And then there are some people that are like, no, I don't want to see it because it could affect how the outcome is supposed to be or who I'm supposed to meet. There are sometimes that I wonder if I think too much about the future, it may alter what I actually do. Is that a problem with looking at future studies, that you then become enamored, obsessed, paranoid by what potential, that you're so scared to act that you actually may not reach certain potentials, you may not do certain things because of that?
Well, I suppose it's a question of the preferable and not preferable futures, that if you have like a future vision that this is what I want, you will start to do the actions, hopefully actions to get towards that. And I suppose it can change your behavior, and it's a big thing, this visualization, that you see that what you want to see as a preferable, and then you start to work towards it. Definitely can affect your actions.
That's a good point. I love how you tied it back to future studies as well. Anna?
Yeah, we realize that we have some sort of possibilities or preferences, some things anyway, some visions of the future. We know what we wish, we know what we definitely don't want to get. So there will be, they become as kind of secret or invisible supporters for us, so that even though we don't think about intentionally, we start to take the steps to that direction that we prefer. It's not so obvious always that we are going to the right directions, and sometimes we have the kind of dead ends and we have to come back and start again. But anyway, the vision goes into our backbones, and that asks us to go to that direction that we are now taking forward. And together in this project, it's kind of destiny for everybody of us.
Very good point. I think for this last question, or the semi-last question here, I think we've answered that, but I do want to ask about the way that future cones inform Colors for Craft and the project, and what it actually contributes. What information are we finding at this point for the future of Colors for Craft? Is there anything that we can reveal from what we've learned thus far?
Well, what we have definitely found out that with our 3 Futures Cone workshops is these 6 themes, like what applies to the natural dyes and future. So basically, we are pretty sure that we have gathered all the information in a sense that we are ready to make themes. So that's probably one of the answers. And then 5 orbits of Futures Cone, we have also gathered information from the business as usual future to the preposterous future, so different levels of happening. So we have quite a good amount of data now to really look at and categorize, analyze further.
And I think from this data that we have, we're basically then also planning potential steps, potential partners to work with. Is that something that's being considered as those next steps as well?
Yeah.
Anna?
I have 3 ideas about what we have. And the first thing I would like to say, I forgot to say it earlier. Laura described about the future's cone, that there is past is in the left narrow tip of the future, of the cone, and the future is on the right. It is interesting that Boros, who is behind of this type of future's cone, has been put it that way, so that the future is on the right. I argue that all of us don't think that way, the future is on the right. By myself, for example, my future is always on the left, and so it is completely opposite direction, but I don't mind. It is just for me to think about what kind of attitudes or thoughts about the future it brings to me when I'm working seriously on the opposite direction. The other thing is that We are definitely got in the Futures Cone work. We have got this moment that we know what we laugh at, for example. In the last Futures Cone workshop, for example, pastel colors came really nicely up. And this argument that we don't want to get those pastel colors. We don't want to get them anymore. They are ridiculous. They are ugly. There was really strong emotion to the pastel colors. And at the same time, when I was looking that why on earth this came up so strongly, I'm not sure what were the ideas really behind those comments, but I realized from fashion history that whenever there has been pastel colors coming up in the discussions or even in fashion, in the use of more people than one only, is that there are conflicts in the time. There is kind of atmosphere that the coming together with the pastel colors. So that is something that there are kind of invisible things coming up or things between the lines we are discussing. We are discussing certain things that we have been able to report already, but there are things coming up and they are interesting for me. And this weak signals is something that I'm looking at more, or of course more than these pastel colors. And then the third thing that has come up is this networking that we have been discussing about different sorts of networks, new partners, new cooperations, opportunities, companies, institutions with whom we could work, or who knows more than us, or with who can give some information to us, or with whom we can share our thoughts that we have got in our working. So those three things are some things that I'm looking at. What we are getting with the Futures Cone.
I have two follow-up questions for you because you've raised some interesting points there. One of the questions that I have, I want to go back to your description of when I think of the Futures Cone. To me, it's not from left to right. That for you, it's from right to left, and it kind of goes more towards upward. Why? But I'm wondering why you envision that. Is it because you're left-handed or right-handed? Like I'm wondering, that came to mind. But also, what is it that's making you envision it that way?
I let Anna answer in a second, but there are different researchers have done futures cones for different directions and also one this straightforward up and down futures cone. But I think that it's a matter of your brain and how you visualize things, because for example, months in this annual clock, I see them not clockwise, anti-clockwise. My world, we are now in a left corner of the clock that we are going to the summer. So basically, I suppose it's very much about your imagination and affairs from people to other. And people also see time very differently. Like they see, and different cultures have seen time very differently. So it depends on your family or your upbringing, your own visualization, and like lots of things.
Anna, do you want to add?
It was nice that Laura mentioned this clock. My clock is going the regular way than we are working in here, but in future it might be the opposite way, that time to be followed. So the time system is from left to right, but something for some reason kind of working not with the left brain makes me to the other direction. But I feel that there might be something in the art education that has given me this direction that my future is on the left. There is, I don't remember the name of the person, that is kind of SWOT analysis basically, that has this kind of four directions that are important. And the first is kind of vertical directions, that there are the dreams on top above myself. That's kind of the heaven. And then there is a ground that I stand on. There are traditions. So I'm always dreaming with my head and standing really strongly, heavily on the ground. And then on my right, there is the home. There is the place where I am, what is comfortable to me, what are the kind of traditions to me. And then the future in that theory is on my left, which means that when I am dreaming and I'm thinking about future, it definitely goes to the above to my left. And it is going to the opposite direction than that futures cone that we use. So that's kind of comforting me because I find the theory behind it, and I can lead it back to the art education.
I see it differently. So have you ever seen those 1970s, 80s horror movies where they do the vortex And if you're going and you see the person walking towards this big gaping, look like black hole, and that's the way I see the future. Not as a black hole, but as I'm walking towards something. Like I see the cone and I feel like it's coming from the center of the body and I'm going in the direction of the future. So it's about progressing forward. I don't see it as going in any direction. I just see it as going forward. So if you take the cone and you put a person at the end of the smaller end, it's going towards that, and you're seeing the side view of them. That's the way I see the future's code.
So that seems like the coming to the world first and then going away from the world that is set. You come from somewhere, black hole, and go to towards the light at the end, and it's kind of surrounding you. I understand your point, actually. We are actually now, when we are doing this project, we are quite much looking at the future's cone on the side. And it brings me back to the childhood when I was thinking the time like outsider, bystander. And I was just looking at somebody doing something and not being part of it. And that reminds me to really try to go into the future's cone. And of course, this model that I just described about my where my future is, it means that art educators have given to me a model. I'm looking at it from a side. That is something that we should think about. What is it to be inside the future's cone? It was like in the Arcticum, in the exhibition, we also had the side view. There was the circle at the one end of the exhibited piece, but still we didn't think about how to be surrounded by future's cone. There was Piritta, who was planning the exhibition. She had for a long time the plan of three-dimensional future's cone, but it had been so huge, so we couldn't do it. But anyway, we can imagine it. So that is something that we should actually think about and discuss it, since we are in the middle of our project, so we have time to, with all the group, to discuss how it feels like to be in the center, not on outside of the future's cone.
And I have an idea. We can even though it's a big thing to do physically, we can do a 3D model or a digital reconstruction or a digital construction of what it is for a person that's in the center of the cone and what that surrounds. That could potentially be something to visualize. Look at us hammering out ideas and having therapy sessions. Two final questions that I want to conclude with. Why is future studies important? We talked about what it is. We talked about, kind of why we do it, but why is it important?
Well, the basic reason is that it helps individuals and societies to anticipate the future and therefore to prepare for the future. And we had this COVID example that if you are prepared for the future, you do better. So that's the short answer, actually. And it's the future is unpredictable. You cannot really predict it, but if you are done future studies and some ideas, then you are probably still better prepared if you are just not seeing anything.
On a personal question, out of curiosity, why is future studies important to you?
As Laura said quite many things that I thought the same way, but basically I'm a person who would like to know future a bit ahead of time. So it is built inside, even though I'm a person who would like to be exactly in time in certain places, but I don't like the situation that I don't know anything, even not a slightest thing about the future. So it is for me kind of preparation for uncertainty, so that I can tolerate something that is coming. And of course, for that I read horoscopes and weather report. I'm curious about fashion. So there are certain areas of future studies that I keep myself aware of. But personally, I think that I would like to be more calm. And future's thinking or knowing something about future helps me in that.
Yeah, and personally, I'm fascinated by the future. Really believe that things get better individually in personal ways. So I was talking about this visualization. Basically, I have these views of my own future, and how I would like to proceed with things and how I would like to make them happen personally. But why is future studies important for me is also like in a big scale that we could be prepared better. Future has fascinated people through the times. Like it's something that you feel fascination about it, that what might happen. So I suppose it's a curiosity is the word.
I think that's perfectly valid, because if we look at Michelangelo, we look at all of the great masters, they were envisioning things for the future. They talked about the future of what something was going to be. So I think that's on everyone's mind.
And Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci as well. Yes,
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of, because he was always thinking about. I think if there was the contraption of wings, the first idea of like flying and how we can fly. I think it's one of the things that he created, and that was in my mind. I said Michelangelo, sorry, Leonardo da Vinci, and I think there's another element of this, because I think we all have gotten to a point where we don't like not knowing the future. That's always been my thing that I hate the most. I hate not knowing. I hate when something's thrown at me and I don't know. But there's also a question of whether it's about control, like controlling what we know, controlling how we react to it. So I think, again, where we're asking these questions, but I think it's really interesting, all of these different perspectives, that it's personal, it's organizational, it's cultural, societal. Like there's so many ways that when we think about the future. So thank you both for that. I want to conclude with the question that I asked all of my guests that come on. And Anna, you have shared your answer before, so if there's any updates, we'd welcome it. But the question is, what does color mean to you?
Thank you for the question. I have prepared for that new viewpoint to that. First, I look at color from fashion perspective and think about how color or what color does mean to me professionally. And colors in the fashion industry are a way to awaken to upcoming changes in fashion and the need for renewal. Color is a way to highlight new features of fashion, for example, silhouettes, materials, textures, whether the change will be large or small. Sometimes I ask whether the color itself changes, or is it just the color story that changes? The stories are told so evocatively and interestingly that the desire for color is ignited in me before I even notice. And the second comment of color comes from personal perspective. My main color in public is black, and I use white as its companion. It's my professional color, that means the color of fashion designer. Privately, the color scale includes not only blue, but also intermediate colors. That means green, purple, and orange. You may not believe in that, but it is true. And in springtime, I find myself craving bright turquoise. I cannot say why. Bright turquoise does not even suit to me. It's definitely some kind of color awakening to the growing season, the need to go to dig my garden.
I like how you've just talked about that it's seasonal, that it changes. Colors is seasonal. Laura?
Yes, brilliant. Like during this project, I have read books about color psychology, and it affects our mood and memory and decisions and our perceptions of things and how we categorize things. So basically, the question is that why color is important. It's all over our everyday life. We couldn't manage without the color. It would be really difficult manage without the color because it has the warning signs and symbolizes things. And as Anna said, she likes to look like a fashion designer. And I have a similar idea that even I haven't done designing for my day job, only very short of time. I like this idea of being designer and wearing black, because that's a designer's color, that when your creations are colorful, you are kind of the creator. And that's my preference in coloring, also in public, is wear black. But what color means to me, otherwise, I love colors. Even I wear black, I really love like flowers and colors. And sometimes when I treat myself, I buy a bouquet of flowers to myself. And I have heritage that like a love of flowers from my mother, that it's like I'm not very good in the garden, but I really like these like flowers you can buy, and all the colors, sunset or sunrise, or now it's very pretty weather in Lapland, that it's like these spring colors and so on. So it's like everything, like a landscape. It's part of me being outdoor person. So it's everything.
Well, that's exactly what Päivi said last time, that it's everything, you know, and I love that answer because it is. And one of the things that I've loved living in Finland is the beautiful skies when the sun is setting. I don't know that I ever remember growing up in the south of the US that I ever saw the vast array of the purple hues, the pink, the orange, that's all that kind of in the sky at that particular time. And I love seeing that. I also had a thought. I think we should all show up in Toulouse for our next meeting in color. I challenge you for wearing black.
Happens.
I would love to see it. I want to see you in turquoise. I want to see you in the flower polka dot, Laura. That would be awesome.
Dustin, the thing is that it will be late May in Toulouse, and it will be in south. So there will be different sun. The black will look 1,000 times better than in Finland ever. So that's one thing.
But you wear black, you're going to get hot.
It is not a problem. We just choose the material and the lightness of the materials. That's helping us. The other thing is that once I was in Italy, that idea for Toulouse and using black is coming from my experience. Once in Italy, I was in one sunny day in Florence, I was buying a really beautiful gray scarf. So it was so beautiful that I ever could imagine. And then we were driving from Florence to Helsinki, and I was for some reason I was looking at my luggage every now and then. And I was wondering that do I see, like in Germany, do I see something wrong because the gray scarf had disappeared and I had violet instead. And when I came to Helsinki, or we came to Helsinki, and I just emptied my luggage, I saw so ugly violet scarf in my luggage that I just wondered why on earth I ever bought it. But it was because of the sun. The sun is totally different in south compared to Finland. So I believe that all the black things that I have in my wardrobe will look 1,000 times better in south under that southern sun.
Well, I'm sorry to say, Anna, that I've known you well enough now to know that there's nothing black about you. You are vibrant, full of life, and full of color. So I will say, I hope to one day see you in color.
You have to come in my free time to when I'm in the garden.
Well, I want to thank you so much for a fantastic therapeutic, but also informative session. Thank you, Laura, Anna,